The emergence of Soviets of Workers Deputies. The popular character of the First Russian Revolution also affected the creation of genuine people's organizations that were the germ of people's power. Lenin repeatedly pointed out that the main question of any revolution is the question of power. Since the hegemon of the First Russian Revolution was the proletariat, acting in alliance with the peasantry, the character of that new power that was supposed to replace the autocracy depended on these classes as well. The organs of the new government could be born only in the fire of the revolutionary struggle, only as a result of the revolutionary creativity of the masses themselves. When political strikes began to grow into an armed insurrection, the proletariat created a new form of mass organization, the Soviets of Workers Deputies, who could lead the preparation of an armed uprising on the scale of a whole city, region, or region. The Bolsheviks, who saw in the Soviets of Workers Deputies the embryo of the revolutionary government, the political form of the revolutionary democratic dictatorship of the proletariat and the peasantry, seized this initiative by acting as organizers and leaders of these new organizations of the working class. The first Soviet of Workers Deputies was created by Ivanovo-Voznesensk workers during their summer strike. In the autumn of 1905, especially in the days of the All-Russian political strike, the Soviets were established in a number of cities: Moscow, St. Petersburg, Tver, Kostroma, Lugansk, Ekaterinoslav, Saratov, Rostov-on-Don, Kiev, Odessa, Nikolaev, Novorossiysk, Baku, Krasnoyarsk, Chita and other cities and workers' settlements. The creation of Soviets of Workers Deputies marked the entry of the revolutionary struggle of the proletariat into a new, higher stage, when an armed uprising was put on the order of the day. The Soviets of Workers Deputies, wrote Lenin, are organs of mass direct struggle. They arose as organs of struggle of the strike. They became very quickly, under pressure of necessity, by organs of the general revolutionary struggle against the government. They turned irresistibly, by virtue of the development of events and the transition from strike to insurrection, into the organs of insurrection. 1. While at the head of preparations for an armed uprising, the Soviets, which were rudimentary organs of people's power, took control of public life in their hands. In order to protect public order, Soviets created the PA. 1. V. Lenin. Collected Works, Volume 11, p. 103. The militia, the workers' detachments, the Red Hundreds and other armed detachments of the working class. The opportunism of the Mensheviks clearly manifested itself in their assessment of the role of the Soviets, which they regarded as mere local self-government bodies. While the Bolsheviks supported and developed the initiative of the workers in every possible way, rendering them all-round assistance in creating Soviets, the Mensheviks retarded this matter. They detained for several weeks the formation of Soviets in Odessa and Nikolaev. Due to their fault, the Soviets in Kremenkug, Yuzovka, Mariupol and other cities were formed only in December 1905. The revolutionary initiative of the proletariat was picked up in some places by peasants and soldiers who, following the example of workers, created the Peasants' Soviets and the Soviets of Soldiers' Deputies. However, revolutionary peasant committees often appeared in the village. At the time of the elaboration of the agrarian program on the eve of the Second Congress of the RSDLP, Lenin attached great importance to the peasant committees, which, in his opinion, were to be the first step so that along the provincial villages the peasants should rise on their own feet and take their own fate in their own hands. 1. The Third Congress of the RSDLP, in its resolution on the attitude towards the peasant movement, obliged all members of the party to demand the immediate organization of revolutionary peasant committees, with a view to carrying out all revolutionary democratic reforms in order to rid the peasantry of police bureaucratic and landlord oppression. 2. In the process of the deployment of the peasant movement in a number of provinces, in the autumn of 1905 revolutionary peasant committees were created. They led the struggle of the peasants against the landlords and paralyzed the activities of the bodies of the Tsarist authorities, which the people disliked. The peasant committees lent the landowners indemnity, headed the peasant masses in the defeat of the landed estates, carried out the seizure of the landed estates, cattle, etc., i.e., they acted as organs of the people's revolutionary power in the countryside. In the development of the revolutionary struggle in the countryside in 1905, a serious role was played by the All-Russian Peasant Union. It was formed in the summer of 1905 on the initiative of the peasants of the Moscow province. The masses of the revolutionary peasantry were united in it. All Russian and provincial congresses of the Peasant Union adopted resolutions demanding the transfer of land to the peasants, the convocation of the Constituent Assembly. 1. V. Lenin. Works, Volume 6, p. 378. 2. The CPSU in Resolutions and Decisions of Congresses, Conferences and Plenums of the Central Committee, Part I, pages 80 and 81. The collection of the introduction of compulsory 5-year education, etc. It was, wrote V. Lenin, a truly popular, mass organization, which, of course, shared a number of peasant prejudices, supplied to the petty bourgeois illusions of the peasant. How compliant are our socialists? Revolutionaries, but definitely soil. The real organization of the masses, which is unconditionally revolutionary in its basis, capable of applying truly revolutionary methods of struggle. 1. The Bolsheviks did everything in their power to wrest the peasantry from the liberal and socialist revolutionary influence that was holding back the revolutionary initiative of the peasantry. They exposed the pseudo-socialist character of the socialist revolutionary program of socialization of the land, explained that the demands of the socialist revolutionaries on equalizing the distribution of land with the preservation of capitalist systems had nothing to do with socialism and were ultimately beneficial only to the kulaks. The struggle of the Bolsheviks against the socialist revolutionaries, Mensheviks and liberals facilitated the expansion and strengthening of the alliance of the working class with the peasantry, this basic and decisive force of the First Russian Revolution. Undoubtedly, the emergence among mass organizations of workers and peasants of mass organizations, as well as the formation of genuinely popular power by the revolutionary masses, also testify to the depth of the popular revolution that took place in Russia in 1905–07. The Soviets of Workers Deputies, created during the First Russian Revolution, were the greatest historical achievement of the working class in Russia. They were the prototype of Soviet power, established in our country as a result of the victory of the Great October Socialist Revolution. The experience of the first Soviet served Lenin as a starting point for the further development of the doctrine of the Soviets as a state form of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The Soviets of Workers Deputies have written many bright pages in the history of the First Russian Revolution. Where the Bolsheviks were at the head of the Soviets, these rudimentary organs of people's power were the centers around which the masses of the working class were rallying, preparing for an armed battle with Tsarism. On the contrary, the Soviets, headed by the Mensheviks, could not play a positive role in the revolution. The Menshevik leadership constantly hampered the initiative of the workers' deputies. This applies primarily to the St. Petersburg Soviet of Workers' Deputies, headed by the enemies of the revolution, Trotsky, Khrushchev, Parvus. They did everything in their power to prevent the transformation of Peter the Great. 1. V. Lenin. Collected Works, Volume 10, pages 232–233. Burgian Council in the organ of armed insurrection. A different situation developed in Moscow. The Moscow Soviet played an outstanding role in the revolution of 1905–1907. At the head of the Moscow Soviet, from the very beginning, the Bolsheviks stood. Thanks to this, from the first days of its existence, the Moscow Soviet was closely connected with the revolutionary masses and headed for an armed uprising. This circumstance played an important role in the fact that from the autumn of 1905 the center of the First Russian Revolution moved to Moscow, where in December 1905 the largest armed uprising of the proletariat took place during the entire period of the Revolution of 1905–07.